When we voted to leave the EU 2 years ago, I watched quite a few videos on some really prominent people that have got some major followers, really seem to know what they're talking about. And there's at least 2 or 3 of them that were quite clear that yes, we voted to leave, yes, that's all fantastic, but don't think this is the end, because they're not going to let it happen. Now, in the back of my mind, I knew that they were correct, but I really did not want to believe it. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I started my YouTube channel back 2 years ago. Ever since we decided to vote to leave the EU, the likes of the government, MPs, Parliament, celebrities and all that kind of people have been trying to put roadblocks in us leaving. So the first thing was, yes, we voted to leave the EU, however, we did not know the journey, how we're going to leave the EU. So they started bringing in the single market and the customs union, even though the likes of David Cameron and everyone in the Remain and Leave camp quite clearly stated that once we'd left the EU, we would have to leave the single market and would have to leave the customs union. So otherwise we would be a part of the EU still part of that structure. Now, I knew what was going to happen from there, that they're going to keep going on and on and on and then change it to make it even worse for us to leave. So they've been trying to put away this scaremongering out, like stupid things like sandwiches. We're not going to be able to make sandwiches anymore, or we're not going to be able to fly to Europe anymore. Now, of course, the scaremongering hasn't worked because we're not stupid. You know? One of the things they put out in newspapers is just it's mind blowing. Please excuse, I'm still getting over my cold. So they now brought out the people's vote. Now, just look at this sensibly, okay? The people's vote was the EU referendum. It was the choice of the people whether they wanted to stay inside the EU, the European Union, or leave the European Union. Again, not leaving Europe, leaving the European Union. So they bring out this people's vote, and they want it to be a three-part people's vote. So, for instance, we would either go with a deal, with a Chequers deal, say for instance, crash out and go to WTO rules. I don't actually like that word crash out, but it basically is what it is, and that's the best for us, I personally think. Or we stay inside the EU and we don't leave. It's basically just another referendum. Now imagine that there was a so-called people's vote, and on that people's vote, WTO rules won, but it won by a very narrow margin to staying inside the EU. What happens then? Do the likes of Sadiq Khan, Theresa May and other parliamentarians, MPs, get together and say, well, you know, that was really, really close. Maybe we should redo it again? How many times does democracy state that you need to redo a referendum before you accept the result of the people? How many times are you going to question the people that put you into office? And in that question, I'm talking to the likes of Sadiq Khan, talking to the likes of Theresa May, all the MPs that are in Parliament today, or the House of Lords. At what point do you stop questioning the people and start to realise that you actually work for the people? You actually realise that you gave the permission to the people to have the EU referendum in the first place because you, being MPs, didn't have a clue where to go with it. You see, the fact is, democracy was done when the EU referendum was completed. You've decided to go against 17.4 million But worse than that, you've decided to go against the values of Britain today and in the past. You're putting our country to shame, and for that I will never forgive you. But there is one thing that I will say to you, all of you people. If you go against the EU referendum and go back to the EU, things will never be the same. People will not believe in Parliament anymore. And there's one thing that I can near enough guarantee. The riots of the poll tax will have nothing on the riots about the EU referendum. So the choices are very clear. Go with the vote for the EU referendum. Do what you said you was going to do, Theresa May. If the EU don't want to play, we leave under WTO rules. If they want a deal, then we'll have a deal. Just so long as our values and our red lines are not crossed. But do not be under any illusions whatsoever. We are not going back inside of the EU. The EU are an undemocratic, crumbling organisation that have screwed up lives right across Europe. And it's about time the likes of the Londonites start to do a bit of revision and understand exactly what they're voting for. I'm out.